Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So I'm the last person standing between you and coffee, but I believe you will find some of the indicators I'm going to share with you quite interesting. The OECD is an international organization mainly known for its economic data on every sector you can think of, but also it's a source of policy recommendations. Our customers are the 35 member states of the OECD, and we've been conducting a lot of work on different sectors, marine sectors over the years, fisheries, shipbuilding, transport. And some 5 years ago, we actually became really much aware that looking at the ocean needed a horizontal approach. So we launched a project on the ocean economy that actually translated into some very interesting findings. We did work with Ireland ever since the beginning, and I have to really thank the Marine Institute, you, Peter, Niall, Helen, and the entire team for actively supporting this activity and for your very warm welcome today. So for us, at the OECD, and this is based on the consensus of a large international group, the ocean economy has two main pillars. It seems quite obvious for people that have been working in ocean industries for many years, but at this international level, it was quite new when we actually published these findings back in 2016. For us, the ocean economy relies not only on the ocean industries that we typically know all very well, but also on the marine ecosystems that they rely on very often. And these two pillars need to be valued, because very often what you value, you cherish more. And this is something I think that's very important. The president of the university just before me mentioned the fact that some work on socioeconomics of the ocean are crucial. We believe at the OECD that this is crucial to inform the policymakers. So here are a list of ocean industries that we're looking at. We decided to divide them between established and ocean-based industries, established and emerging. You will find here aquaculture into emerging industries. You may find that a bit surprising. After all, aquaculture has been around for thousands of years. However, what's very impressive is the industrial scale that we are seeing in terms of development in many parts of the world. Also, there are a number of other activities that I'm going to come back to. Indeed, offshore wind energy is providing some surprises here. So what we did is that we actually looked at the value of 10 ocean-based industries as a proxy for the ocean economy. I'll come back to the issue of ecosystems in a few minutes. And what we find is that based on our research, around 10 workshops organized with industry players around the world, well, the value of the ocean economy is already some 1.5 trillion USD. This represents the GDP of Canada, which was at that time number 9 in terms of the richest countries in the world. By doing some economic modeling, we projected to 2030 and got to a doubling of this ocean economy to 3 trillion USD. That's equivalent to the GDP of Germany, which was 4th in terms of the richest countries. That shows you really the impacts that we are seeing in many of these ocean industries. Typically, all are growing. All are growing. Offshore oil and gas are growing less rapidly because of the large investments that are needed in order to get to the resources over the next decade. But what's very surprising, I would say, for non-experts, was to see the rise of offshore wind. It's quite impressive. And as we've heard yesterday during many of the presentations, indeed, the costs of developing large-scale farms has actually decreased much more quickly than what was expected. And this really translates well into some of the findings that we've had so far. Now, to give you a bit of perspective here in terms of the growth of a number of sectors, we see that maritime and coastal tourism is an important sector. And I have to admit here in Galway, you have many, many advantages, and I'm sure that you will build upon them, especially in preparing for the 2020 year, where you're going to have a lot of visitors. So this is a very growing sector for many parts of the world. Now, in terms of ports, deep sea ports are also growing very fast. I was recently in Halifax, and there are a lot of investments in order to welcome some of the large ships. And I know that there are also some activities going on here in Galway. Marine aquaculture, developing extremely rapidly, maybe too rapidly, some may say. I'll come back to that. Fish processing. There's still money to be made in fishing, that's for sure. The sustainability of it all is under question for some species, but there are definitely some very interesting ways to actually try to promote sustainable growth here. And obviously, offshore wind is just off the scale at this stage. Overall, the ocean economy sectors that we've seen are all progressing faster than many of other sectors of the economy. So the ocean is really an important domain to look at for policymakers. Now, it's not all black and white, and that's something that really comes back to us very often. In terms of valuing the ocean economy, it's still quite tricky. There are some different definitions around, and we are at the OECD pushing for a lot of standardization, I would say, with different actors around the world in order to see how they measure their ocean economy. We are doing also a lot of work on different very specific domains, like ocean observations, for instance, that are crucial elements to understand how our activities are actually affecting the oceans, but also how to actually harness some of the elements in the ocean environment to push for more economic growth. So the value of ocean observation is one of the topics that we are looking at with quite a number of actors around the world, including our colleagues from NOAA, our colleagues from the Marine Institute, the IOC at the United Nations level. So that's the value of ocean observations. We are also specifically looking at how to integrate all this national data on the ocean economy, link them with the national accounts to make things way easier, I would say, for policymakers when they make their decisions. And here, I have to tip my hat to Highland. I told you we really started to work on this ocean economy some 5 years ago, getting this horizontal look. And there are a number of actors around the world that are really champions in trying to assess the socioeconomics of it all. And Ireland has been really pushing for a lot of discussions and for a lot of good standards in terms of how you measure things. So with this, I really congratulate you, and the latest reports that are coming out now are really, I think, demonstrating to many other countries around the world that you can actually advance and provide some evidence for policymakers. Now, going back to innovation, and that's, I think that will link well with some of the other sessions that are coming later this morning. We see this expected increase in value added, not only from typically economic activities that are really driving some of the sectors with a lot of investment from private actors, but also from innovation. We started to hear that yesterday, but definitely in terms of shipping and port activities, the likes of Rotterdam, for instance, where you see automation actually being taken up and providing many productivity gains. In terms of the industrial marine aquaculture, there's been a lot of challenges. There are still many challenges, but we are seeing many new technologies and also advances in marine biology, that are actually really improving some of the processes. In terms of cruise tourism, here we see large ships that have also many challenges in terms of pollution, and that I think that's something to remember in terms of supporting this industry, and obviously offshore wind, with in particular material sciences. So here I just have some drivers that are really pushing for science, technology, and innovation. We see this all across the board in different parts of the world. There's a lot of investment right now going into STI for the ocean in different parts of the world. particularly in Asia, that we often do not know about. And indeed, there's a lot of financing, including from private actors, just to enhance competitiveness in particular, to build up efficiency gains, cost saving. In terms of expanding the technological frontier, there are still, and we heard it again yesterday, there are still much better information on some of our planets, and I know because I've been doing some work with the space sector over the years on Mars, as compared to our deep seas. There's also, and that's, I have to admit, relatively new, a strong push to respond to climate change and sustainability challenges. We are seeing this more and more, and this is very encouraging, particularly in terms of the biotechs and the green technologies that are being put in place. Green ships, for instance. We've had a recent workshop at the OECD specifically on this, where we see many advances coming along. And of course, we are now improving knowledge of the ocean environment. This issue of seabed mapping, for instance, there are quite a number of initiatives around the world that are really providing more data on the oceans. So what we are doing right now in terms of how innovation is supporting the development of a sustainable ocean economy is that we're looking at some of the incremental technologies that do improve efficiency, productivity, cost structure. All this will be actually coming together in a report that will be produced as a follow-up to our large report on the ocean economy in 2030 at the end of the year. And that will provide quite a number of findings on how innovation policies are supporting the ocean economy with some instruments that can be useful, levers that can be actually activated to really push the development of these types of technologies. So here, incremental technologies that are actually feeding in different ocean-based industries. But we're also looking at disruptive innovations. We have a lot of activities on what we call the next production revolution at the OECD, looking at the issues of automation, for instance, artificial intelligence. And we're seeing here already some of these innovations being integrated in many of the different ocean industries that we are looking at. What's, I think, most interesting for us at this stage is also to look at some of the technology synergies among sectors. There's this project in the US, for instance, on what they call rigs to reef, with using former offshore oil platforms to build up reefs that can be then used for ecosystem regeneration. This is a very interesting initiative with some very interesting findings. In Portugal, there's been also some studies that are demonstrating how ecosystems can regenerate if you actually put the conditions right. It's still, of course, not the perfect solution to regenerate. It might be better to protect. And on this note, actually, we just produced a report on the economic models for MPAs, marine protected areas. Protecting zones in the oceans doesn't mean that you cannot use these MPAs. And we came up with a number of economic models that we listed, and this report is available. And finally, let me share with you here some work that we're doing on the emerging and new patterns of collaboration. Again, here we've actually been able to survey around 15 research centers around the world, and we've done some close work with our colleagues again here with the Marine Institute in terms of looking how, beyond industrial clusters, actors are actually cooperating together to develop new innovations based on fundamental research, solid science, and working with the private sectors and beyond. And just as a bit of info here, all the major innovation networks that we've seen for the ocean economy are less than 5 years old. It's just incredible to see how actors are trying to work together in order to develop beyond patents, beyond licensing agreements, new ways of working together in order to promote sustainable ocean economic activities. And I think this type of work will actually really improve some of the decision-making along the way for a number of actors that want to fund, in particular, some of these innovation networks. So we will continue working on this over the next couple of years. The objective, again, is to provide evidence-based information to our policymakers, to institutes that are active in the ocean economy, in order to make sure that we get to as much as possible sustainable growth. The objective is really to prepare the new wave of innovations for the ocean economy. The main messages here, and I'm sure I don't have to convince any of you in the room, is that indeed the ocean economy is very significant, it's growing. At this stage, it's not sustainable. We still need to find some solutions to make sure that the marine ecosystems are included in valuation exercises, and there are a lot of activities on the academic side that are now finding their ways into policy circles. And we believe that innovation really holds one of the key. There's this saying that science without conscience is but the ruin of the soul. So we need to be very careful with how we fund the innovation of tomorrow, of course. And we see a very strong role for governments in supporting these developments of the future innovations. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the panel later this morning where I may maybe answer some of your questions. So thank you very much.